This is the witching hour. It is the hour when dogs howl and evil is let loose on a sleeping world. Want to hear about it? Then turn out your lights.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Moose.
And the Mini.
And we're here to talk movies with you tonight. Tonight, we are going to be talking to you about something especially spooky. Oh, that's right. It's a little film that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2015. A little film called The Witch. It came into wide release 2016. It was directed by Robert Eggers, starring Anya-Taylor Joy, Ralph Ineson, Kate Dickie, Harvey Scrimshaw, Ellie Granger, and Lucas Dawson. And we're going to do some talking about it tonight. And with me, I am the Moose, and of course I have my Minnie. How are you doing tonight?
Tired.
Okay, well, hopefully we won't keep you up too late, and we can keep things interesting.
Let's do that.
Let's keep you up super late?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll do what we can. No promises here, but we'll try to keep it as entertaining as we can. So why don't we get started with a little bit discussion of kind of the setup of this movie. Now, of course, anybody who's listening to this, if you're listening to people talk about movies, you should know that there are spoilers coming. And if you don't want something spoiled for you, get the fuck out of here, because we're not ruining the experience for you. That's on you. And if we discuss a movie that maybe you haven't seen yet or you're kind of curious about, then check it out for yourself and then come back and give us a listen and see. We might just be talking out of our asses here, but at least we try to be entertaining about it, gas and all. So this film, which is set 62 years before the witch hysteria in Salem, Massachusetts, takes place in New England. And what we've got is a family consisting of, we've got William, Catherine, Thomas and Caleb, Mercy, and Jonas, who are basically brought before their town, which is a plantation of Puritan settlers. And they're basically standing trial. And what they're on trial for, and I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but they're being accused of what's called what they actually say is prideful conceit. And you're giving me that look, and I love that look because I get to do explaining. Prideful conceit is basically the idea of that you know something so well that you feel as if you've been graced with a knowledge that's particular just for you, that you should be sharing, that your interpretation is better than anyone else's. So basically what they're saying is all the honest preachings of God's New Testament, as William says, he's preaching that, but from an angle where he's like, I know better than most of you do.
Oh, I thought, in the beginning, I thought it was the thing where that astronomer dude was trying to convince everybody that there was more than just the Earth, that there was other universes around. I thought they were being trial something for something like that, they were talking about God wasn't, it was a different way, so I was kind of confused.
Okay, so we got that kind of straightened out now.
Yeah.
So because it gives, what's important about a lot of this is within the context of the story is the notion of that the story has to exist from the mindset of the people in the time. And so you have to really get into the headspace of people who lived in the 17th century, who were living through that period. And I know that the director has spoken about it in interviews that he's given, where the fairy tale world, I'm using air quotes, which is hilarious. I'm using air quotes
like a dinosaur.
Like a dinosaur. Like a really awkward T-Rex. It's a big head and little arms. It's basically that fairy tales and the real world for those people are the same. They're not, we look at fairy tales we tell scary stories about the witch that lives in the woods because we don't want the kids to go out in the woods.
Yeah.
But that's just maybe that is the case for some stories, but maybe it isn't. But for those people, the reason that they told stories, there's a witch in the woods or there's a monster that lives on the mountaintop or whatever, is because in their world and their reality,
It's real.
It's real, right?
Well, if I don't want Marissa and Colin to go in the woods, I just threaten to throw a ball at their heads, and it works.
All right, well, different strokes for different folks. I suppose. She's also been watching a lot of Bones, folks, so
I'm sorry.
she's got a lot of weird machinations on the brain. So we've got this family who has been basically, I want to use a fancy word, but I'm stumbling on it right now. I feel like somebody's tongue is just falling out of their mouth on the floor. I'm stepping all over it. They've been thrown out of their community, essentially, which is something that I actually have a bit of a comment on, because if anybody who's doing their light-handed research on this, if they're online reading about, you're going to read a lot of things where it's like this family left where they were at. That's not the case. They were thrown out. It
was very clear.
They were told basically shut up or we're throwing you out.
Yeah, I heard the guy, it was like he was basically telling the man, what's his name?
William.
He was basically telling William if he didn't start believing in what they believed, like that certain like straight set line,
by the rules of of the church and the Commonwealth, is what he told.
Yeah, then they would be cast out, and he refused to concur with what he was saying. So then him and his family were thrown out of the village.
Yep, they took all their belongings into their carriage and off into the wilderness past the plantation they go. Now, since there's no real way to tell the distance of time passage with it, we know they're out there at least a night, because we've got one scene where they're camped out after they leave the plantation. And then there's some day shots the next day, and then we see them at what it will soon be the homestead, which is on the edge of the dark forest.
Yeah.
Which, honest to Christ, if I could pick any place to build in that time, I wouldn't have picked right there. I mean, the like creepiest looking place in the world would be the last place I'd be wanting to set up shop. Period.
Especially with all these witch stories and like stuff going on.
Well, you got to remember that this is before all the witch stories that started out through New England. So all the references they had were the things that they were taught and the stories they'd heard. Very unlikely, because they'd crossed over from England, so they were new. It wasn't like they had been here for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because later
later
on, we'll get to that point. But we'll skip ahead for this conversation.
For a second.
Catherine actually says, "I want to be home.
I want to be at England." I thought they were in like a little town in England or something. I was very confused. I'm not that good with what is it called?
Geography.
I almost said geology instead. I was like, that's not right.
Don't know much geology. Okay, we're really just falling all over the place here. We're having way too much fun, if you can't tell, and no, nobody's drinking. All right, so we've established. So it's New England. It's on the East Coast. We're talking like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, all up and through there. So what we've got is they finally have come out into the wilderness and they've set up shop. Now, Catherine, the wife, was pregnant before they left. If you notice during the trial scene, she's got a very noticeable baby bump going on. And then shortly after, they have started homesteading at some point, because we go from them discovering where they're going to set up shop. And then we move ahead through a space of time. Once again, we don't know how long. Obviously a matter of weeks, I would say, because the home has been established. They've built up some fencing. They've planted some crops. So they've been there a considerable amount of time. But Samuel has been born in that time. And he's the youngest member of the family.
He's only a couple months, maybe weeks old.
Yeah, maybe. I would say probably, a couple of months would be my best guess. Yeah. So while outside one day, the oldest daughter, Thomason, is charged with watching the baby. And during a game of peekaboo, if you've seen the trailer, where you are, where's Sam? Woo, there's Sam, there you are. All right, and literally, I clocked this. This is how curious I was. I clocked this. From the last time she puts her hands over her face and then says boo, it is 2 seconds. Literally, 2 seconds. And from the time that she has opened her eyes to looking across and actually making the move through the field, chasing toward the wood, because you see some of the brush and stuff kind of wavering back and
moved out,
forth, like somebody's moved through there rather quickly, is like 6 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of space, first of all, you know I'm fast. There's no way in hell I could clear that distance and not sound like a moose falling down a set of stairs. Just clump, clump, clump,
And
clump.
then, like, skipping forward a little bit here, they they were saying that a wolf did it, but they would have Thomas would have seen the wolf.
That's another thing, is that, well, you would imagine, regardless of the situation, let me be very clear here, folks. Disclaimer. I have never had a baby stolen by a wolf or a dingo. A dingo has never ate my baby or any of the other things. But I would imagine you would have heard the baby cry if a wolf came by and snatched it up.
Yeah, like seeing a big gnarly thing in front of your face.
But
would, like,
literally
scare you.
within 2 seconds, it's cooey noise and dead silence, and there's nothing.
I mean, come on. It can't be anything.
But, yes.
It could be a chupacabra, I guess. A chupacabra in the midday, like, could have stolen the baby, but I could be wrong about the folklore. I've heard about them.
But the fact is that the family, once we move further on, basically William convinces Catherine and the children that it must have been a wolf, it was a wolf what took the baby, you know.
He has such a deep voice. I could barely understand him in that
Such a
movie.
great voice. Oh, my God.
I love it. Don't get me wrong, but, like, some parts in the movie, I was like, what did he say? Did you hear that? Did you hear what he said? I'm so confused.
Such a great timbre to his voice. Now, that has happened, and while Thomason has run to the edge of the woods screaming for Samuel, what we then cut to is the one thing I didn't expect that we'd see, and that is actually someone walking through the wood with the crying baby.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that was something I expected out of this movie to be given that kind of is it or isn't it kind of quality, where it could definitely be a witch, but it could also not be a witch.
Like, kind of the new... No, I'm getting off topic. I'm not even
No
saying
worries, no worries. But what really got me was in that scene there, when we see that it's someone who has actually taken the baby. My mind was like, okay, this is different. But then my mind immediately went to, okay, maybe it's not a witch per se, but what if it's some woman who lives in the woods who's like into herbal remedies and is like totally like granola hippie and all that fun stuff, and is just trying to help out, and people call her a witch. That was knocked out of the park in the next scene, because in the next scene we've got,
oh my God, this part scared me.
in the next scene we've got the baby on the altar.
That's what that was. Oh, stupid.
And then she brings the knife, and the notion of suggestion is more than enough, because the next thing you see is the witch from behind, and she's completely naked, this old hag-looking woman, and just turned. Well, what? I mean, that's a traditional imagery of the witch.
Oh,
but
I'm just thinking about it.
Turned around, and what you think is actually musical accompaniment to the scene is actually
it's
her
like this knocking.
It is music in the scene, but it's also time to her churning, and she's actually churning
The baby,
the remains of the baby. It's an unguent is what it's called, and what it is, and this is actually in folklore, is that unbaptized baby males, especially babies and especially males, they were ground up and mashed into a salve or like a lotion or an unguent. And what they would do is they would rub it all over their bodies and all over whatever implement that they would use to fly. And that was how they were blessed with the ability to fly.
2 comments.
Go.
Number 1, I'm the one that's supposed to be learning about witchcraft, not you. And number 2, my friend Robert, when he was trying to get baptized, he thought that he was in trouble and they were trying to drown him.
Oh, that's adorable.
I heard that story.
That's adorable. The views from the other side of the aisle, folks. That's what it's like.
Sorry, but
remember,
I just thought
one
it was funny.
person's baptism is another person's attempted murder. So we've got that nasty nonsense, which we get to see, and she takes no shame in smearing dead baby all over, and all over her magic stick, and then let alone she takes that stick and starts flying the fuck away. And I'm like, okay, we're going weird
That
places.
kind of was like one of the most shocking things to see in the movie. Not like because it was just so graphic and it was like precise to things you've heard. It was just kind of messed up for me, and I've seen gruesome things. I was watching that Touching the Void documentary, and I saw a guy's knee go backwards, and I was laughing at that. So it was kind of so that's an idea of how gruesome it was to see a baby get murdered.
Okay, so we cut from all that nonsense, and then the next day we found out that William and Caleb are going off into the wood to go hunting. We've learned that William has stolen his wife's father's silver cup and sold it to Indian Joe, and I forget the other guy's name. Indian Tom. It was Indian Tom. Excuse me.
Tommy.
A couple of traders, and basically told Caleb not to tell Mother that they were out in the woods hunting or that he sold the cup. We will not talk about this. Meanwhile, they spot a hare, or a large rabbit, if you will. And what is interesting about that, and it struck me as familiar when I saw it, but I actually had to do the research on it, and that hares are traditionally associated as witch familiars, which they would actually use sometimes, according to folklore. They could use like almost like remote viewing, where they would have the animal go near someplace and it could watch through their eyes. Or sometimes it could even take that form. So it once again ties back to that weird notion. And especially because when he shot at it, the gunpowder ignited wrong and blew up in his face.
Yeah.
So not only could he not shoot the damn thing, but trying to wounded him.
Yeah. Whatchamacallit, since this is about, 62 years before the Salem witch trials, which, around the Salem witch trials is when cats, like the black cat, started becoming like a more common symbol for, witches' familiars. Like, a lot of people, I don't think I would have known, unless I had looked into it before now, that, rabbits would be a familiar. Everybody associates witches with cats. I don't understand why. Just kind of got around, I guess.
Well, it's one of those things. It's one of those weird staples of old folklore that carries on with such an impact that it becomes kind of a staple in kind of the subconscious of like people, where they're just like, oh, of course, witches, they ride brooms and have pointy hats, and they have cats. It's a stereotype. But stereotypes exist for a reason to some degree. So one might think that at some point in some accusatory history, we're not saying that anybody was a witch or not, but somebody might have been running around brandishing a pointy hat and having, some
maybe it was a mentally
skin
ill witch.
Condition issues. Maybe they had the pus psoriasis, and I don't know. But people was weird back then.
Yeah. Some stereotypes keep you safe. Not race stereotypes, but maybe monster stereotypes. I know that sounds really complicated, but in my mind it's not.
So remember, if they're undead, take off the head. All right. So now we got those stereotypes out of the way.
Don't even get me into a conversation about what you believe could be real.
Now this is something interesting, because when I was rewatching it for our show, after Caleb and his dad come back from the wood, Thomason is off doing some laundry. She's washing some of her dad's clothes in the creek, and Caleb comes, and they have a moment where they're just talking, and Mercy, the one of the twins, the girl twin, comes up and says, "I'm the witch of the wood," and starts all this nonsense about, "I'm going to get you," and things like that. To which Thomason replies, "You're right, there is a witch, but I am she. I'm the one what stole Samuel."
Yeah,
and starts teasing her back and scaring the shit out of her.
And she pounces on top of her and like pretends to claw her face. And then she swears that she'll murder her if she tells her mother or father anything about it.
What I found really interesting about that scene was that was the first time within the story that someone had said the word witch.
Yeah, nobody had mentioned.
Nobody had said witch before that. Nobody had mentioned witchcraft or dark magic or any of this, the devil on the doorstep or any of this stuff.
Black Phillip wasn't even...
Black Phillip wasn't even a pain in the ass yet, and we'll get to Black Phillip.
Oh my god, I just did a drawing.
You did do a fantastic drawing of Black Phillip. That was actually really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled by it.
I thought it'd be nice.
So that later that night, we find out that whilst they're having their grown-up discussion times, and no, that's not a euphemism, folks. They're actually discussing grown-up matters while the children are supposedly asleep. We've learned that Thomasin has now gotten her womanhood, which in the parlance of our times mean that she's done got her periods.
Dad, you can't say it like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. She is now visiting with her Aunt Flo on the regular.
Okay.
Is that better?
You know what? I don't think there's a great way to say it, so I guess the first time was... whatever, let's
just
continue.
Go with that? Okay.
Yep, let's just go with that.
So she's of the opinion that it's time for Thomasin to leave because she's a woman and should be found to a family somewhere else. She should be married off to some degree because that's kind of what people did.
I know that.
But at the same time, at the base of that, there's almost like some kind of... It almost seems like she's a little almost jealous of Thomasin because she keeps remarking how she's young, she's beautiful, all these things that she's listing off. And that will come into play into discussion as we keep going.
Catherine actually did look, not to be rude or anything, but she actually looked kind of old. Like, not grandma old, but she looked older than, like, I don't know. I'm not trying to be
For
rude.
your consideration of comparison.
Like,
Okay,
I didn't mind it, but I was just like, it kind of was like something that would like snap in your mind. You would notice it. It's just a noticeable perk.
So after overhearing that discussion, early the next morning, we've got Caleb trying to sneak out to go hunting in the wood. And Thomasin demands that he take him with her or she's going to tell. Basically, he wants to go out and hunt and bring back food so that she doesn't have to leave. While they're out hunting, though, they get separated. A horse rears, throws Thomasin, knocks her out, and Caleb runs off into the woods looking for their dog. He then finds the dog, just guts everywhere.
Yeah, like two ends of the dog have been pulled apart and then like played with where the guts were laid. That's what my description.
And then as he continues further into the wood, he stumbles upon like a little dirt ground. I would almost say hobbit hole, but that sounds way too comforting for what's about to happen. It's basically a ramshackle of a shack kind of thing built into the ground with a bit of smoke coming out of the chimney. And as he approaches, a beautiful young woman comes out. It comes straight over to him, gets very close to him, and then begins to kiss him, and then reaches up with a wrinkled, raggedy old hand
Which
and
is
clutches.
like unusual because she looks like 20, 19. It's very beautiful. Like, it's just like that weird old witch hand. It's like if you guys have seen Krampus, the Krampus poster. Imagine that, but grabbing a little.
That's very good. I like that comparison.
That's
really
why I love drawing that. The nails are my favorite part. It's just like so long and weird to draw.
So while all this has happened, we've got Catherine and William basically kind of skirting the farm. It's now gotten dark. They're out with lanterns. They're shouting for the children, trying to find them. And if I remember correctly, they've got Mercy and Jonas like tied up by the waist with rope like to the house so they don't wander off.
If you need to put a child on a leash, I mean...
Well, those two you might have to.
There actually are children leashes. It's like they're monkeys. I was like, yeah, you can have leashes for human beings. It's amazing what people will do to keep their kids from misbehaving.
But in this course of time, Thomasin is woken from being thrown from the horse, and she starts to follow the shouts of her father's voice. Finds her dad. They head back to the farm. Caleb's not found. So then, with everything going on, Catherine's blaming her for taking Caleb into the woods and for stealing her cup, at which time, finally, William admits to her that he stole her father's cup and sold it.
Yeah, I honestly, I like, even the first time when I watched this movie, I wasn't that much younger. I was like a year, maybe. But still, I could understand enough that I get the sense that her mother does not like Thomas that much. Like, Thomasin, sorry. But, like, she treats the twins not, like, spoiled, but she treats them a lot better than she treats Thomasin. She's kind of, like, the neglected child. That's how I would describe it. Like, her mother didn't seem to like her, and it just kind of bugged me. Like, you would notice it.
There was a lot of underlying tension in that relationship, definitely.
Yeah.
It was
kind of sad to me.
It was very sad. As we go on, we find out that later that night, Caleb actually returns to the farm, but he is naked, feverish, and delirious. So he's
Very
all
pale.
out of sorts, completely out of sorts. So they bring him inside, and they get him into bed, and Catherine's watching over him, and she basically tells William, while he's telling her that he's going to try and get what he can of the crop together, take the goats, what he has, and try to get to town, to sell it for a horse, to come back, get Thomason, get Caleb, take them to town. He basically wants to. I'm gonna take what I can, sell it, get us another horse, come back and take us all back to town. And he tells Catherine, "You'll be home candle time tomorrow. So tomorrow night I'll have you back at the plantation." So they're probably within a day's ride
Yeah.
of the plantation, or at least the nearest settlement of people, or the nearest homestead.
Yeah.
At which point, Catherine basically says, "This is witchcraft. What other kind of thing could this be? We're being tormented, and it's because of you." She blames him. It's
Yeah.
his fault. It's your fault we were thrown out of the community. It's your pridefulness that sent us here, that lets you think that you can make a crop when you can't. That says that you'll care for us, but you can't keep your baby safe, and all these things.
She was like stressed out because like her couple month old baby was vanished into thin air by a wolf, air quotes, and then her son just like is all delirious, whispering weird crap. Like, I mean, I understand why she could think it's witchcraft. I thought it was witchcraft. You kidding me? If my kid was doing that, I wouldn't even care if I was cast out of the town. I'd try and get him to the doctor.
So while they're debating all that, Caleb begins to have a violent seizure, and at one point he actually coughs something up out of his mouth. He clenches so hard that his father has to put his knife between his teeth to pry his mouth open. What they pull out is a bloody apple with a bite taken out of it.
And earlier, when I don't know if it was when Caleb and his father had gone into the woods, and Caleb told his father that he thought he saw an apple tree.
Yeah, they would. That's what they would tell Catherine when they came back, that they had been out looking for apples. He thought that's exactly what Caleb told his mother when they came back. I thought I saw an apple tree down in the valley, but there were none. So there's the lie coming back, not only to William and Caleb, but also the bite out of the apple, kind of the temptation of Eve thing, where she took the bite from the apple.
Oh, I remember that.
So there's that thrown into the mix as well. And by the way, if we have to get to the point in the story where somebody's coughing up a nearly whole apple, I don't have any medical excuse for that, because before that, if you look really closely at the corn that they're growing, there is this fungus that's growing on it. Now that fungus is a particular fungus that is associated with corn called ergot. And ergot is actually a hallucinogen. And in this is actually something that is regarded in the scientific community regarding the Salem witch trials, is that they believe some of the hallucinations and experiences that some people may or may not have had might have been the result of rotted bread, a certain type of bread that they produced, that when it actually began to rot and grow a fungus would actually present hallucinogenic qualities.
Like, I know they could have imagined the apple, but I don't think our camera, like, took drugs. Actually, I stand corrected because I was playing Guitar Hero and the whole screen went neon, so I think a camera can be on drugs.
Right. But it's one of those little things that's kind of thrown in to give you that question while giving you all the information. It's giving you every bit of information it's got. And at the same time, there's lots of these reasonable things that are there, too.
If you're smart enough to notice them.
Right. But the thing is that even those reasonable things don't explain everything. So it's like you may try to find reason in something small, but that's not going to explain everything. Once again, it's a battle of reason against faith amongst a bunch of people whose faith is very much being tested.
Yes.
So after the apple incident, he has another seizure and basically has this euphoric fit where he sits bolt upright, he throws his head back, he's staring up, raises out his arms, and basically proclaims some glorious revelation of, feeling God's love or what have you, and then promptly dies.
Yeah, just lays back down very calmly. Seems like maybe the seizure or the trance or whatever he's in is over, and then it's just lights out.
And meanwhile, whilst they're trying to get the children to pray over him, the twins begin to stumble over their words of the prayer, of the Lord's Prayer. And they say that they can't remember. They've been bewitched. And that it was Thomason that did it to them. So begin the accusations of flurry. Because the twins then accused Thomason of being the witch. She told us so. She said she was the witch of the woods.
All
She
because
took
she's playing
Samuel.
a prank.
All because of a little bit of a prank that's going completely crazy.
And then
She turns around and tells them about the talks that they're having with the goat,
the Black Phillip.
Black Phillip. And we'll get to that in a minute too, because I know you were curious
Oh my
about
God, I
what
love
the
the
words
Black-
to the nursery or the sing song are, and I've got those for everybody.
Thank you.
So, completely pissed off on the whole situation, he throws all the kids that are still alive, so that's 3, Thomason, Mercy, and Jonas, into the goat pen for the night. Now, while they're out there, sometime in the night, they have a visitor that sneaks in. And what you would
Not
naturally
through the door.
assume would be possibly an animal turns out to be a naked woman who is drinking the blood from one of the goats.
And then she turns around and looks at the twins. And you can imagine what happens next because you zoom out to the chicken coop or goat, or where are they? Well, not in the chicken coop.
They're in the goat pen.
Goat pen. I'm sorry, I'm not that smart, guys. The goat pen, and there's a lot of screaming. So you can imagine what's going on.
Yeah, they never get full on. Of course, you don't see. It's all suggested. But meanwhile, we've got Catherine inside the house, and she's having a vision of Caleb coming through the door holding the baby.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So then she's given the baby, and she takes the baby, and she's so happy. And so she starts breastfeeding the baby. It's only after we take a moment and the camera kind of pulls out of what she's living in that we see that she's actually has a raven
Yeah,
biting at her breast
that kind
and
of.
chewing at her nipple.
So, oh my god, I'm just like imagining that. Oh, I'm gonna throw up. Oh, that would hurt. Oh.
So the next day she's in bed. She's scarred up and bloody and just exhausted and pale. William goes outside. He sees that the pen has been utterly destroyed and the twins are gone.
Yeah, I remember that because you never really get to see anything except for a bunch of blood and then some missing twins, and then he.
Yeah, well, the goats, they not only had all their organs torn out, they were skinned.
Yes, I noticed that. Like, they weren't just gruesomely murdered. They were also, like, in the process.
And then the worst thing of the whole mess is that the only one who's left is Thomason, and she's basically covered in blood.
Yeah, I mean, so it's reasonable to accuse her. I mean, it's not the right thing to do, but.
So she wakes up, and William's freaking out because he wants to know what happens. And then enter the world's worst farm pet, Black Phillip, who then gores William into his stomach and chest, into the woodpile where he dies.
Yep, and then Thomason, I'm sorry, I'm trying to like remember so I don't screw this up. And then Thomason gets out and is starting to walk towards the woodpile to see if her father is okay. And then we have her crazy mother coming out, seeing that everything has been torn apart, the animals have been killed and put on display-ish, and that her father has been shoved into the woodpile. And then she attacks Thomason.
And in self-defense, she kills her own mother. And so Thomason is left alone on the farm with just her and Black Phillip. And so that night, she sets out and sits with Black Phillip and begins to actually talk to him. She wants to know
If he's real, if he actually has things to offer in all this.
And so something else that took me, when it happened, it sent chills up my back, was that
I love it.
you hear this voice, and suddenly Black Phillip is talking back, and you're like, okay, that's a bit weird. And the things he says, they're such the tempter's words. Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
You took my heart. Oh my gosh.
Wouldst thou like a new pretty dress?
And while you're hearing that, like, you can see Thomason's face and shoulders, and like there's this, well, I guess you could call the devil or a very scary entity, like having its hands on her shoulders in the back. So it was very interesting.
And basically from all that, do you want to taste freshly churned butter? All these lavishly good things. And she's been through so much that she just says yes. And he tells her, sign my book. And just out of nowhere in front of her appears a book. In a traditional witchcraft folklore, you would have to sign the devil's book, and that was what granted you access to powers, was that you made a deal with the devil. But she tells him, I don't know how to sign my name. To which he tells her, I will guide thy hand. Like, I will even help you because you want it so much.
How did she not know how to write her own name?
Well, she was a young woman in the 17th century.
Oh,
they weren't
I thought
exactly
it was
expected to write.
I thought it was like something where the twins forgot their prayer.
No, nothing like that. And so we don't see the signature, but we assume she signs the book because the next thing we know, we see her toward the darkness of the wood, followed by Black Phillip. And she's disrobed and that she's completely nude as she wanders off into the woods further and further. And as she gets further, she begins to hear chanting and then sees the glow of a fire. And then we see, I believe it was five other women standing and chanting around a fire, all in the nude, all various ages and body types, who are chanting and gyrating around the fire. And she approaches, and as she approaches, she begins to see all the women begin to lift up and slowly levitate. And as she stands there, she begins to lift up into the air with them. And thus ends The Witch.
Yeah, it was a very good and scary and good movie.
It was a lot different than a lot of the things we're seeing with, we've got to take a moment where everything's really quiet, and then we're going to, I'm going to jump out and get you. And they're like, oh, God, Billy, you scared me. I didn't know you were going to come around the door. Well, gosh, Lucy, I didn't know you were going to be standing there. None of that nonsense. It is purely trying to set you into the mind frame of being a person in that time and experiencing what it is to live with a terror that, while we look at it as silly hokum stories, for them is absolutely as real as I'm here looking at you. It's that real for them. And that's what's scary for me. And a lot of the roads in here, Robert Eggers really did his homework. And I think he said he spent it was 4 years researching not just the way that they spoke, because all the dialect within the film is 17th century sourced. So it's all how they would have referenced to each other and the way they would have spoken things and said things. And a lot of people really turned off by that. Why are they speaking all funny? It's like, that's the way that they speak.
We just somehow evolved to the language we use now.
Right. And so there's variations on the, evolution of language at points. And so we have to be able to loosen our ear to some degree to be able to understand all those words in a way that they're words we know, but the way that they're put together and the syntax is different. So we have to adjust how we understand it.
It was actually very easy for me to understand them. Like, I don't think Marissa would have understood some of it. But because I read books like that, I read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe, and I've just heard it often. It wasn't that hard for me to understand it. It was easy to adapt.
But the one thing that I did notice while we were going through here, and you can jump in whether or not you agree, that there are various aspects of each family member that represent certain sins, whether they be, against 10 commandments, or I went with more of the traditional, the 7 deadly sins.
Yes, yeah.
And I've actually got a breakdown if you're interested.
I would actually very much like to hear it.
So what I've got is, and the only one I couldn't find for was the twins, and I'll address that in a second. William would be the prideful one because he believed that his interpretation of what he was preaching was the right way, more so than anyone else's. It was his pride that Catherine accused him of, even, that caused their misfortunes. Catherine suffered avarice or greed or want because she was wanting to go home. She was wanting to get rid of Thomason. She was wanting her father's cup.
She wanted nice things.
Catherine didn't necessarily want nice things, but it was her own. It was her own inability to kind of let go of where they had been but she also couldn't be honest about it either. She
wouldn't
she
admit
never
it.
expressed that to William until, after Caleb had died, or was almost dead.
Yeah.
Thomason would be what I would call the example of sloth in the story, and that's basically somebody who casts aside their duties or doesn't want to do them. Because our first spoken encounter with Thomason is her asking for forgiveness, asking for mercy from God. Begging for it, because she says, I've broken every one of your commandments, even if only in thought. I've played about on the Sabbath. I've done all these things. I've ignored my mother and my father. All these various things of just kind of not doing what is quote unquote spiritually responsible of her. So it's spiritual sloth to some degree. Okay, Caleb is lust. And that is represented when it is after Samuel disappears. It's the morning after Samuel's gone. He awakens before Thomason does, and she's having a nightmare. And she's rolling around, and her nightshirt moves just a little bit, and you can see just a bit of her breast, more than you would ever normally see, especially of that conservative clothing. And he stands there for a minute and just kind of watches her and looks at her body. And that also comes into play later when the young witch gets him in the woods, because it's a young, beautiful, voluptuous woman who would be much more appealing to his, because he's a young adolescent, he's coming through hormones and all that kind of crazy stuff. He's probably getting interested in girls, as we would say. And so that would be a much better target to go after him with than scraggly old witch. But once again, it leaves you that fine detail when she does grab the back of his head while they're kissing. It's the gnarly old hand, right?
Did you get Sleepy Fluffy?
Now, as for the twins, I have no clue. I can't find anything of the seven deadly ones.
What are the 7 deadly sins? I've heard of them, I just can't remember them.
Well, I know somebody out there who might be listening to this will probably be really disappointed that I can't just pull it up off the top of my head, because I've seen 7 so many times. But I will do the best I can. It is pride, greed, sloth, wrath, lust, and envy. I even did that without having to pull it up. And gluttony. I forgot gluttony. That was 6. Gluttony.
What's gluttony?
Gluttony is just is too much. It's excess. It's using so much as to waste.
God, I wish I don't know what the twins have. I don't know what they have.
Yeah, but what I would say is that if they do have anything, it does definitely break one of the traditional commandments of bearing false witness or lying. Because they say, we know Thomason's the witch. She bewitched us. She's bewitched us. That's why we can't say our prayers. So basically, when they find themselves a family who believe that they are on such a pious route, a godly route in their lives, and that they are misunderstood, and that everyone else has given to their lighter ways, and it's off into the wilderness and alone, where they're left with nothing but their wits and their God.
Yeah.
That not necessarily abandoned, I don't know, because I can't speak for God in the movie, but definitely they've got their own baggage going on here. That at the time, the idea was that it was easier for the devil or his agents or witches and stuff like that to get to you if you had things like this going on with you.
And it was easier because they were alone. Like, they couldn't just move to a neighbor's house or something, like in these weird horror movies with the ghost stuff. Right.
So it's got all sorts of weird, these awesomely didactic spiritual connotations between the good and evil, but what is good versus what is evil, but mostly within the self.
Yeah.
Because it's a whole lot of, we're good people, we are doing the right things. But at the end of the day, are
you good people? Like, you've committed all these sins that you're supposed to follow.
But it's also the littlest of things. William didn't want Catherine to be worried that they had gone hunting in the wood. Yeah. Don't speak of it. I sold the cup because we needed something. It was so that we could survive. But I took it. I stole it.
Technically speaking.
But don't tell her. It was secrets. It was these little things, these little cracks in the foundation of family that was already on shaky ground. They'd been taken from they'd left their community and were off on their own, and now it's just them. And when you're surrounded by a bunch of people or a small group of people and you can't suddenly are not able to trust anyone, it's all those distortions add up and it becomes a whole.
Yeah.
It's just one distorted whole, which is really, really, really weird. So that's some of the fun they're having.
What about the Black Phillip nursery freaking
I figured you'd ask about that sooner or later, so we're going to get to that. So if the twins in the film sing a little, I don't know if I want to call it a nursery rhyme, but it's definitely a little song, and they sing it as they chase and taunt Black Phillip around the farm. And after some digging around, I did get the words and lyrics for that little jaunty.
With it?
Yeah. So, well, I don't have it so I can play it or anything like that, but I will read it out to you. I'm not going to sing it because that's just too weird. But Black Phillip, a crown grows out his head. Black Phillip, to Nanny Queen is wed. Jump to the fence post, running in the stall. Black Phillip, king of all. Black Phillip, king of sky and land. Black Phillip, king of sea and sand. This is where it gets interesting. We are ye servants. We are ye men. Black Phillip eats the lions from the lion's den.
Okay.
Yeah, no, if that didn't give you a little bit of that's
That's
what?
nice.
Yeah. So it's, even reading it now, I'm sitting here going, okay, so are the twins more involved than we know? Because we never have any idea what happened to the twins. They're just gone.
You never see them again.
Just gone. Maybe they were being used and manipulated by some degree, but I don't know if I necessarily get behind that. But
I honestly think
creepy little bastards, those two.
God,
oh my God, so creepy.
I honestly, I hate them so much. I think they're snobby little kids. I don't like them. They remind me of two people I know.
So as we get down toward the roundabout here, just a few little tiny bits of trivia for anybody who's interested. The film was shot in over 25 days. And it was done in a similar fashion as The Revenant, where they tried to use mostly natural light. So it was natural daylight, natural nightlight, or moonlight. But when they did have to light a scene, they would light with candles to give that glow and try to bring that ambiance of being in that time back. Now, I mean, the entire place is constructed exactly how it was. Literally, the house was made of dirt and dung, and it's exactly how somebody would have, at the time, lived.
Yeah.
And it was done down to a detail which is absolutely amazing. It has gotten a lot of critical acclaim for the most part. It stood at 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is an aggregate, which goes through the different reviews and tries to pull out, certain key phrases or, parts of reviews that they try to give it a generalized up or down kind of score, whether or not it was good or bad, and then they summarize those into a total. A lot of fans were pissed off at this movie.
Why?
A lot of people said this movie wasn't scary.
You're kidding me, right?
Nope. And remember, we may have some of those people in the audience, so try not to say anything offensive. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But quite frankly, look, sometimes people are scared by stuff that I'm not afraid of either. But genuinely, I was completely disturbed by this.
After I watched Lights Out, I was kind of afraid of the dark. Like,
oh yeah, Lights Out totally did it too.
I brought my lightsaber, like that really freaking bright one, and I was like, nope, not getting me. Yeah. Actually, it scared me. I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was well done.
Yeah, it was one of those, when I got done watching it the first time, I immediately knew I had to watch it again.
Yeah.
Because,
I wanted to look for more. I wanted to get as much knowledge of this movie I could into my brain.
Right. And it wasn't one of those things where I left with oh my God, I'm scared of witches. It's nothing like that. It's one of those, like this entire film is basically just a slow march of dread through the worst possible thing you could imagine if you were a 17th century Puritan.
Exactly. The first thing is literally the first thing we see in the movie. They get cast out of their town.
Yep. Being just, bye, good luck, see, whatever. Damn it. I knew we should have left sooner.
Should we ask them to give us our stuff back?
Can we stay? Can we stay? Maybe just outside the gate? You know, we'll just hang out. And it'll be cool. That would be cool.
I left a pair of shoes in my room. Can I grab
Can
them?
I just come back and get them? It'll be
really
real quick.
important.
I'll just be in and out, and then you can lock up. It's fine.
It'll only take 5 seconds.
It'll take 5 seconds. But this definitely harkened back to a lot of these older movies that took their time, didn't rely on jump scares. What gore there was very much, that's something you don't hear every day anymore, was very much used within its intent. It was never too much. It was never like, oh my God, where did all this blood come from? It wasn't like rooms full of blood. It was like, no, I can tell where that came from. Some animal got slaughtered or something. And especially once we got into that whole, churning of the baby butter nonsense. Oh my God, that was awful.
If you want to say that was not disturbing to you, then you seriously need to rethink some life decisions.
Like, there's enough in there. Like, I don't know if I'd have the same response if I wasn't a parent, but I mean, it made me uncomfortable, and seeing the kids in danger made me uncomfortable, and just it was kind of like having a knife put to your neck and just slowly turned just deeper and deeper. That's what it felt like. This movie was constantly just getting its fingers around your brain and squeezing tighter and tighter.
Until it eventually just got too tight.
And there were even times when I got done and I was like, did I see when I was like, am I supposed to, like, I get all the literal things I'm seeing. I get that. Am I supposed to infer some other kind of nonsense to it? Like, maybe this is, like, at the end when she wanders off into the woods and she sees the witches and starts flying and stuff. Is she having some kind of post-traumatic breakdown, or is this more hallucinations? But at the same time, it's just like, we've gone down fucking Wackadoo Street so far. And since nobody stopped us from going down Wackadoo Street, this is exactly what's happening, and I'm sold.
Yeah, I mean, that baby thing still got me. Like, I can't believe, I mean, maybe it's different. I mean, even if you're not a parent, that's still gonna mess you up. Well, unless you're an alien like in Rick and Morty and eats babies to survive. I just thought about that.
You never know what they're gonna need, Morty. Okay, that's really bad. I can't. Not even gonna try to get that one going any further. So if you're out there listening and you've gotten through this, I want to say that this movie got one of my, I don't know if I'd give it a point, but it's got one of my highest, it's one of my favorite movies of the last few years. It's up there with some of my favorite horror movies. It's up there with like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, the original Halloween. I know people are like, what are you talking about? There's jump scares in Halloween.
Big deal.
There's like one or two. If we're really going to cut into it. But really what that movie is, it's a lot more build up and dread and slow terror before we start murdering people. Like a guy who's got his hobby, he wears a pinky ring and his hobby's murdering people. So if you're a fan of slow burn horror, this is definitely for you. I don't know why you're listening to this for a recommendation, because we just spoiled the whole fucking movie for you, but maybe you'll like watching it better than anything else that we've said.
It's my favorite horror movie.
Yeah, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share, Brianna?
I like the movie.
You like the movie?
I guess. I'm not good at this stuff.
That's okay. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. We will be back on the sound sphere sometime in the near future. If I don't know if anybody will hear this or find it entertaining or not. If you do, let us know. Feel free to post a comment or send us a message or whatever you feel is necessary. Let us know if you liked it, if you didn't like it, what we could do better, what we could do worse. This is just our first run, and it's not like we really we didn't really put a whole lot of meeting time into this. We basically went away and said, watch this, get some thoughts, let's come and talk about it, and that's what we've done. So if you want to hear more of me and the Mini talking about movies, stay tuned, because we will be back, hopefully. Let us know what you think.
I'm smart.
And this is the Moose.
And the Mini. Oh, I missed that.
And we are going to say good night, and we will see you next time.